All right, hello everybody. We're going to continue on with our muscle story here. We're still doing muscles of the cranium, the face, and the neck. And the next one on our list was number 5, zygomaticus muscles. So pay close attention to where these muscles are located because there are a number of muscles. We're just kind of hitting a few of them, not going into every single one of them here on the head. But right there, that's called the zygomaticus major muscle, and that's the zygomaticus minor. And so you have that on each side. And look how the fibers are running. They're running on a diagonal. And if I turn my pins on, we can see here are the origins in red. Let's see. And down in here in blue, these are your insertion points. So these muscles will be stationary. The zygomaticus major is actually attached to this portion of the zygomatic bone. That's where it gets its name. The zygomaticus minor is attached underneath this circular muscle here on another part of the zygomaticus bone. So that part stays stationary. The muscle is pulling on a diagonal on these tissues around the lips. So visualize that in your mind. When those muscles shorten, it's going to pull up on the corners of your lips like this. So these are smiling muscles. The action will be to lift the corner of your mouth in a smile. Okay. All right, and then we're going to move on to the next one. The next one on your list, number 6, the buccinator muscle, named for the buccal cavity inside the cheeks there. All right, so that muscle right there is the buccinator. And hang on for just a second. All right, I refreshed my view here for a second because I wanted to add a muscle back. I had stripped this one off. And let me deselect the buccinator for a second. This one right here, which you'll see on any pictures and textbooks or whatever you're looking at, or any of the 3D anatomy apps you may be using, they'll have this muscle. And that's called the risorius muscle. And you don't have to know that one. So we're just pretending like we don't know that it's there. So we're going to deselect that one. Actually, let me hide that one. We're focusing in on this one. It's a little bit deeper. That's called the risorius muscle. And let me turn our pins on. So there are your origins of the buccinator muscle. Did I just say it was the risorius? It's the buccinator. And then the insertion point is over here around the corners of the lips and some of the softer tissues there. And this is a puckering muscle. If you actually look, we're a blowing muscle. This is the muscle when you're going to blow wind, or you're going to blow up a balloon. You do that type of motion. It's the buccinator muscle contracting and pulling on those tissues around the corners of the lips that allow that to happen. All right. Do those, and we're going to clear all our pins. The next one, orbicularis oculi. I like a lot of these muscle names. They have cool names. So around your eyes, you have these circular muscles. Each of those is an orbicularis oculi. You have one on the left and you have one on the right. And so the fibers run in a circular fashion, as you can see there around the eyes. And let's turn on our pins. So there are your origins, are in some of the tissues around the corner of the eye over here. All right, so orbicularis oculi muscles, when these circular type muscles like this, when they contract, they're actually responsible for a puckering type motion, but around the eyes, they cause blinking. These are your winking, blinking muscles, and they have connective tissue connections that are inserted into the bones and tissues around the eye, and that actually helps prevent a puckering motion. If you've ever seen like a reptile, a lizard, when they blink their eyes, you know how their eyes look like they pucker? Well, that's because their orbicularis muscles around their eyes are not anchored as well as ours are around the orbital cavities. So imagine if that wasn't the case, then when we blink, your eyes would pucker just like your lips do. So those are your orbicularis oculi muscles. Those are pretty easy to see. Okay. Next one, you have the orbicularis oris muscle. This is a circular shaped muscle with fibers that actually run in a circular fashion. So imagine all those fibers contracting when they do muscle contractions at the same time, and that is your puckering muscle. As that one contracts, that's responsible for puckering, as if you're going to give somebody a kiss. So that's different from the buccinator muscles on each side, which allow you to go through the movements for blowing. The orbicularis oris muscle is for puckering. Incidentally, I wanted to point out to you guys, I haven't talked about these, but on here on the Muscle Premium program, and also in other 3D anatomy apps as well, they're showing you the branches of the nerves which serve particular muscles. So over on the physiology side, you're learning about how you've got motor neurons sitting up near the brainstem or down here in the spinal cord. That's where their cell bodies are located. And then their axons pass through these nerves that extend out to the muscles. And their little axons and all the little axon terminals, the branches and so forth that you're learning about over on the physiology side, go down inside these muscles and reach out and form synapses with muscle fibers, muscle cells, so that they can stimulate those to go through the contraction process that you're learning over on the physiology side. So just wanted to point that out to you as well. That's why they are showing all the nerves to you here on this particular video. All right, next one on your list, number 9, nasalis muscles. You actually do have a left and a right. There's the right nasalis, there's the left nasalis. So they run across the hyaline cartilage of the nose there, and they actually insert down into around the sides of the nostrils, those soft tissues there. So when these muscles contract, let me show the pins here. There's the insertion point there, and your origin is over here. When these muscles contract, that is what allows you to flare out your nostrils, and also results in twitching of the nose as well. Like if you're breathing deeply, you need to flare out your nostrils, make them wider. These muscles are contracting to make that happen. All right, the next one we're going to move on to number 10 on the list, which is going to be has a long name, sternocleidomastoideus. Let me kind of zoom in here. All right, and the name actually tells us where this muscle is located. If you break it down, if you're looking there on your study guide, sterno refers to the sternum, cleido actually refers to the clavicle, and then mastoideus, hopefully that sounds familiar to you, mastoid process of the temporal bone. So that's going to let us, this is a fairly large muscle. And I'm going to rotate over here to a side view. Now let me highlight this one for a second. That's called the platysma, and we'll come back to that one. So let me hide that one, and actually I'm going to come over here and hide it on this side as well. So that is a more superficial muscle. And then this is your sternocleidomastoideus on the right, and you have one over here on the left as well. Big, long muscle. So as I mentioned, you've got, if we turn our pins on, origin, it is connected to the manubrium of the sternum, and then also over here on the clavicle. And the insertion points are up here on the temporal bone and also on part of the occipital bone as well. So one of the places where it's attached is the mastoid process, that big bump on the posterior inferior portion of each of your temporal bones. And look how your fibers are running along that diagonal. All right, so let's think about this one. If you contract this muscle staying stationary down here. This is the origin. Insertion is up here. What is it doing? If you contract both of them at the same time, that's going to pull your head down. You're going to flex the neck. You're going to bring the head down toward the trunk. Now, if you contract one side versus the other, then that's going to allow you to tilt your head to the left or the right. So depending on what your needs are, you will contract one or both or some combination of the two to make that happen. Now do notice on your study guide, this is one of the muscles where you're required to know the origins and the insertions. And this one is unique because when you need to, believe it or not, your origins and insertions can reverse. So your origins can become these attachment points up here, on the skull bones, and the insertions can become the manubrium on the sternum and the clavicle. So when that happens, that's actually going to pull up on your sternum and your clavicle. Okay, and the reason that's happening is that allows you to expand your rib cage. And why do you think you would need to do that? If you need to inflate your lungs bigger than they normally need to inflate during breathing, by pulling up on the clavicles and on the manubrium of the sternum, that's one of the things that allows that to happen. So when you need to breathe really, really, really deeply, like you're taking the deepest breaths possible, the sternocleidomastoideus muscles reverse their origins and insertions to allow that to happen. And you can actually feel that if you take the deepest breath possible. As you do that, if you keep your fingers here where your sternocleidomastoideus muscle should be on each side, when you get to that deepest inhale point, you'll suddenly feel those muscles contract. It's kind of cool to see that in action. So those are pretty prominent muscles. Those are visible on a lot of people through the skin. All right, so I've refreshed my view here because I'm bringing back on that side, you've got a superficial, thin, flat muscle called the right platysma, and over here you've got the left platysma muscle. And let's take a look at where our origins and insertions are. So the origin is actually down in here along the first, some of the tissues near the clavicle and along the clavicle, same thing over here on this side. And then your insertion point is up here on the lower underside of the mandible. And so you can see how those fibers are running. So this is going to stay stationary. This is going to be pulled on by the platysma. And so what's your action going to be? It's also inserting into some of the softer tissues around the lips up in here. So this actually helps you with motions like this. When you pull your jaw down, it helps with frowning. Pulling the lower edges of the lips down pulls down on the mandible. So moving down with the jaw like that is depression of the jaw. It also plays a role, believe it or not, in swallowing and pouting. Several different things go on there, as is typical with some of these muscles that we use for facial expressions. Okay, and also notice on your study guide for this one, you have antagonist, the platysma, because it depresses the mandible. It is an antagonist to the masseter muscle, which elevates the mandible. And then because it pulls down your lower lips, it's antagonistic to the zygomaticus muscles, which elevate the corners of the lips. So this is an example where you've got an antagonist to a couple of other types of muscles. All right, so those are actually all the muscles you need to know for the head and the neck. And next we'll be moving down into some of the muscles of the trunk.